has.
Let's jump into the Roto World player news and talk about that Thursday night football game that was an absolute thriller. Kirk Cousins completed 42 of 58 passes for over 500 yards, 4 touchdowns and a pick. We heard from Kirk Cousins after the game on just this pass game getting going.
It was a drive in the second quarter when I threw a couple passes where I was basically anticipating where Kyle was going to be or where Drake was going to be. I was ahead of it a little bit in a good way and threw it decisively, and I thought I just haven't been that decisive the first few weeks. I've been trying to kind of ensure that that's where they're going and ensure that that's what I'm seeing before I let it rip, and felt tonight there was a little bit more now after 4 games. No, I know where they're going. I know where they're going to be. I'm going to let that rip early, and I think that helped me, and so the anticipation, I think, took another step tonight, and that's what I was used to kind of having when you've played with guys for 3, 4, 5, 6 years, and I can feel it starting to come.
Kirk Cousins with the monster night. Jay, you had his passing prop going over. Little did you know you could have taken the highest alt line in the world and you would have still hit as well.
He doubled it. The 229.5, I think, cashed in the second quarter, which was remarkable. Connor's bet gets home as well on Kate Otten. Just a ton of offense in this game. I think Kirk hit the nail on the head, unsurprisingly. He's just throwing with anticipation. It looked different. If you think about the pass that Darnell Mooney dropped, which looked like it was going to cost him the game, Cousins lets that go when Darnell Mooney's not turned around looking at the ball yet. But he just seemed to be in rhythm. And it was just gunslinger Kirk. He did throw it up for grabs, so he could have had 3 or 4 picks, to be honest, but you'll take it from a fantasy perspective. Naturally, he goes 34.4 fantasy points, and this is the Drake London we've wanted to see for 3 years now. I think that's another big story, that he looks like a bona fide wide receiver 1 if Kirk Cousins is going to have this type of ceiling.
Gotta love the Drake.
Yes.
That's a Seinfeld reference.
Okay.
So you know, Jay, because you screwed the one up yesterday. But to your point about, we'll get into Cousins here in a second, but since you brought up Drake London, just want to talk about London here for a second. Best fantasy game of his career, 4th different career game with 100-plus yards. 3 of them have been against Tampa Bay. So it's just one of those things where he just always seems to have the Buccaneers numbers after a very, very, very quiet week 1, which killed one of my guillotine leagues. Thanks, Drake. He's had at least 17 fantasy points in 3 of the past 4 games. He's got almost a 29% target share. And I think the most important thing is they're using him in the slot. Right? They're moving him all over as well. He's already got 24 slot targets on the year. He had 30 all of last year. So credit to Zach Robinson and the entire Falcon staff for saying, like, okay, we have somebody very talented in Drake London. He's no longer going to be the focal point of defensive attention because we're getting production out of Ray McLeod and Darnell Mooney. We'll talk about them for a second. So, but I think this is legitimate with Drake London, especially because of how they're moving him. Again, over the last 3 weeks, over the last 3 weeks, yes, 62% of his targets have come from the slot. I want to make sure I got the number right. So yeah, it's been nice to see with Drake London.
Yeah, it really has. And that's something that the McVay tree consistently does with their number 1 wide receiver. They get to play inside and outside. Drake London is the beneficiary of that right now. Also, of course, on the week, because he had a goose egg last week and he hasn't been good at all this year, that we kind of all said, hey, listen, you could sit Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts catches 7 of 8 targets for 88 yards. Matthew, I know how the reactions are going to be to this. Like, is it now Kyle Pitts time, just when we thought we were out? This is a night that Kirk Cousins threw for over 500 yards.
Thank you. Yes.
How often do you think Kirk Cousins is going to throw for over 350 yards this season?
Right. He attempted 58 passes. 500. Thank you for saying that. That's exactly right? In a game in which Kirk Cousins threw for 500 yards and attempted 58 passes, went to overtime, Kyle Pitts had an under 15% target share. His target share was still 14.8%, still 4th on the team. And this is a game that, and we'll get there, but Bijan Robinson didn't do a lot here. Like, I don't think they're going to get into shootouts all the time. I think this is, look, it's the best fantasy game of Kirk Cousins' career. I think it's going to be the best game of his best passing game of the season for Cousins. And so the bar is so low for tight ends. The fact that there's any sort of production is a positive sign. But I'm not all of a sudden like, oh, all's forgiven. Kyle Pitts is back. He's a locked-in. Go trade for him. He's a locked-in starter. You're good. You know, it was all a mistake to have, if you dropped him or you benched him. You know, listen, I can see how people, like, he was only started in 68% of Yahoo leagues. I'm sure there are, 32% of, managers out there going like, 3 weeks this guy's done nothing for me, and now I finally bail, and now he shows up. So I get it. That's frustrating. Welcome fantasy football. This is the life we've chosen. But he was down 6% in terms of rostership. He's only rostered in 92% of Yahoo leagues, not 100%, which he was at the start of the season. But I don't think we're out of the woods yet with Kyle Pitts. I think he is still a touchdown / big game dependent tight end. I'm not going to rank him any higher. He's still in that 8 to 12 range for me at tight end.
Yeah, his other issue is that Darnell Mooney seems like a real part of this offense. Darnell Mooney had 16 targets last night. He's had 40 targets on the season. He's like a viable flex guy, very low-end wide receiver 2 type. I think the thing to remember about this game is that the Bucs pass defense is an abomination. That was horrific last night.
Yeah.
Antoine Winfield, his absence obviously matters a lot, but I mean, just between the tackling, the separation that they were giving up, the Falcons are moving the ball well. It is insane that the Bucs contrived to lose that game, which is everything they did with game management, with individual mistakes. Why are they catching the interception at the end? Why are you just batting the ball down? Why are you tackling Drake London immediately with 7 seconds left? Why aren't you letting him run? And basically that ends the game. It was just a catastrophe.
Why when they had the ball at the end, why are they running 3 straight plays when they haven't run all day, but they pass like crazy? I get you're trying to run the clock, but it's 1:51. They still have I was watching the game with my oldest son, and he had the Bucs money line. My son's 26, by the way. My sons are of legal age, unlike Jay's children.
Rio actually had Falcons minus 2.5. She's 2 years old, so it's not as legally viable, but
100%.
She was able to get that.
Yeah, and she uses a beard to obviously
some of her 3-year-old friends.
Right, exactly. Listen, Rio's a bit of a sharp, but the fact is that so my son he just as soon as he's like, why are they giving the ball back? They're losing this game. He knew it immediately. And it's like they're gonna come down, they're gonna kick a field goal, they're gonna tie it, and they're gonna win in overtime. And that's exactly what happened. It was
took a live money line at that
point.
point.
Exactly.
Yeah. Hedge your own
bet.
But
it was the Buccaneers had no business losing that game. I agree with you, Jay. It was unbelievably poor. It was entirely coaching decisions.
Yep.
Your defense can't stop anyone. Keep the ball as long as possible.
Yeah.
And you haven't run the ball effectively all game.
A lot of things have been pointed out about how they butchered the game. The one thing that I haven't seen pointed out as much, it's 3rd and 25 with 1:26 left. You're at the Atlanta 43. Why are you running the ball for 1 yard? At that
Exactly.
point, if you get 6 yards there, you get to kick a field goal and you win the game. Instead, it's like, we need to let them burn the timeout. No, how about you take a chance that you actually can get in position to effectively win the game?
As somebody that watched a lot of Todd Bowles coach games, that's how you could love it or hate it. It's how he coaches.
Yep.
He coaches with never goes for the dagger. Ever. Most conservative coaching. And sometimes it does help him. Most of the time, it costs them games like that.
That's what I was saying. That's my point. Is it's right. Baker Mayfield's been on fire all game long. You don't have anyone on the other side. They haven't been able to stop Mike Evans or Chris Godwin or even Cade Otton.
Yeah.
But they have stopped the run game consistently. Right.
Here's the other thing, too. In that situation, Baker had been running very effectively,
he was,
too.
correct.
How about this? Just let Baker, if nothing's open, get him to take a sack. Doesn't matter. You're punting
it's the same
anyway.
outcome.
It doesn't matter at all. It's just absolutely baffling. That game now, they are likely not going to make the playoffs. Now, if they win that game, they're 4-1. They're favorites to win the division. They're heavy favorites to make the playoffs. They've potentially butchered their season in that game because they've got a first-place schedule. They play tough teams the rest of the way. Falcons and Saints have a very easy draw. Very frustrating for Bucs fans.
Very, very, very frustrating. We'll get there in a second, but I think there's so many big fantasy storylines from this game. Last thing I want to ask before we move off, I have 2 last things on the Falcons. But first off, how concerned are you about Bijan Robinson? Right, for in a game in which they doubled the over. I mean, the over was 44. They just blew past it, right? Bijan Robinson in a game in which they're scoring at will, the Falcons. It's his fewest fantasy points in a game this season. He had an under 6% target share in a game in which Kirk Cousins threw it 58 times and for over 500 yards. It's his 3rd straight game with below 14 fantasy points. He's averaging 13 touches per game. His rushing prop was, I believe, yeah. But I think it was 14.5 rushing attempts, and the under hit. You know what I mean? The fact that that's even the line, that you've got Bijan Robinson, and DraftKings doesn't thinks around 15 carries is what he's going to get, which is I get it. Tyler Argill's a nice player, but Bijan Robinson is generational, or should be.
Should be. He's got the talent. And honestly, They just don't really try to get creative with him. That's how you look at this, the usage of him. Bijan's a guy that you would think you want involved as much as possible. I know this all sounds crazy after a night where Kirk Cousins threw for almost 500 yards, but maybe they're not in that game script if they had more creative ways of using Bijan Robinson.
It's just like every game, like Tyler Allgeier's out there to start the second series every time.
Yeah.
Like Bijan played 67% of the snaps last night. It's just not enough. Like this guy was drafted as the number 2, number 3 running back in fantasy. Like he's just not going to sniff that level of production if he's playing 67% of the snaps. It just doesn't feel like this offense is molded to him at all. The Falcons, by the way, they just keep getting away with it. They're 3-2. They really could be 0-5. They probably should be 1-4 or 2-3. Yeah. But the fact that they're able to have this success without utilizing Bijan doesn't bode great for them going forward.
It certainly doesn't. 3 targets.
Or for him going forward, rather.
Yeah, 3 targets in the game. Like he averaged almost 20 touches a game weeks 1 through 3, but the last 2 weeks he's averaging 13 touches. Again, they're just it's weird.
He's peripheral in this offense.
Yeah.
He's Bijan Robinson.
Yeah.
Darnell Mooney's a bigger focal point of the offense than Bijan.
Arthur Smith, all is forgiven. Sorry. Apparently it's not you. Apparently it's just
everyone.
Apparently it's just Atlanta. It's Atlanta.
Think about
bird down. I don't know what that means, but I just it's very frustrating. The takeaway, there's not really a great takeaway here, other than the fact because if you have Bijan Robinson, you have to still start him every week. Like he's still a top 20 fantasy running back. Like especially as we're now into the bye weeks. Like you're not gonna have a better option, And I don't know that you want to quote trade him because unless you can get value, I think the potential upside of Bijan Robinson is better than what you are most likely to get in a league where people know what they're doing and are paying attention. You may still be able to get a lot for him just based on name value if somebody's not paying attention. If somebody was glued to the Mets game last night and didn't see, how bad Bijan was or how little he's being used. But generally speaking, I think you're just sort of stuck with him at this point.
I think the sneaky thing with Bijan too, Connor, is that this offensive line isn't as good as I think it was hyped up to be. Like guys like Matthews, McGarry's been banged up, he had the MCL sprain, Dalman's on IR. Like it just doesn't seem like the dominant unit. And that was the idea behind Bijan. Yeah. Generational talent, really strong offensive line. Now it's like an average, maybe even below average offensive line.
That's where I'm let down right now. I just had higher expectations for this unit because they have been good over the years, but the injuries, and they've just underachieved as a unit as a whole. Well, one last thing, Matthew. I want to ask you.
Rest of the season. You say you're in a draft that starts today. Saquon goes 1 at running back. You want to take a running back. Rest of the season, Bijan Robinson or Breece Hall?
That's pretty tough. I think I would still. I don't know. Yes, because I think Devontae Adams is coming.
Do you?
And I think that even factors less targets for Breece Hall.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's like.
So you're still leaning Bijan?
I think I'd lean Bijan because I think Devontae Adams is coming.
Okay.
I think I'd rather Derrick Henry than both.
I was just going to say, the guy I would take is Derrick Henry.
Right.
I wanted to ask you, now we look back, Christian McCaffrey, Breece Hall, Bijan, Jonathan Taylor, Isaiah Pacheco, all the running backs that went in the first 2 rounds. It is ugly besides Saquon and Henry, right?
Other than Saquon, Henry, and
Kyron Williams is getting a ton.
Kyron Williams has been really good. Kyron Williams, Ken Walker would be up there, and Jordan Mason. If I was drafting today, I might honestly take Jordan Mason too and reach for a round to get McCaffrey just to make sure I grabbed him, threw him on IR, and then it's just like whatever. I got the Niners running back.
I would rather have Alvin Kamara than Bijan Robinson right now.
100%.
I think that there are other guys that you can make a case for as well. Like it's just not happening in the slightest. Jordan Mason as well. He's on that list.
Brian Robinson before he got hurt this week.
Brian Robinson's been fantastic.
J.K. Dobbins gets his offensive line back. Like, it's crazy, but I don't think that he's like Bijan.
James Cook's up there.
Yep.
I know he had a tough game against the Ravens, but James Cook's been really good so far this year.
I'd rather have Ken Walker than Bijan Robinson.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't because I just don't think he'll ever be healthy.
Stay healthy.
I just don't.
But my point is Bijan Robinson was drafted consistently as the number 2 or number 3 running back in every draft. It was him or Breece at 2 in every draft. And he's now he's a mid-tier guy. He's a mid-tier RB2 now. Until further notice, unfortunately, because of the lack of usage and the presence of Tyler Allgeier. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and Rotoworld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Roto World fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own, Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.